Hello and welcome to World of Warbirds. I'm Brian Pierce. Please sign up at my Patreon to get episodes earlier, bonuses, to have a say on future content, and to interact with me and other Warbirders directly. But mainly you'll have the satisfaction of helping keep this podcast going. You can also toss me a tip via PayPal at WOWB17, or even just drop me a review. Thank you for your support. Now on to the show. Hello, Warbirders. Thank you to Tavia Hirschberg for the generous PayPal tip. Thank you so much. Alright, so, never have any regrets. It's okay to admit that you do, and it's nice when you can actually correct whatever you regret. Because, I've been looking at some older shows because of the whole missing episodes thing. And one of them was the Hawker Hurricane, which made me re-examine that series on the Hawker fighters. I had previously stopped at the Tempest and never continued with the Sea Fury. I don't really know why. Maybe I was tired of dealing with the Hawker fighters at the time, or maybe I figured that as this fighter did not actually serve during World War II, I shouldn't look at it. But it has bugged me ever since. Just like the Messerschmitt Me-410, which deserves an episode all to herself also. The Sea Fury was the end of the line for this evolution, and so I think it will be satisfying to actually wrap it up, just as I think it was nice to hear about the Grumman Tiger Cat in that series. I've always had a thing for the end of the line for any piece of technology. Whether it's the very last steam locomotive or the very last classical ocean liner. And so I think it's going to be fun to correct this regret. So if you feel like it, you can go back and listen to the Hurricane, Typhoon, and Tempest episodes. And Patreon members, such as newly signed up Colin and Casper and Tyler Dean, all have access to a bonus episode on the Hawker Tornado. See, there are advantages to being a member. The bonus episodes plus the crazy group chat that's going on over there right now on the OV-10 Bronco. Or you can just jump in right here and we'll get started with the Sea Fury. It's kind of an underdog story because the Sea Fury almost did not happen. The conception for the fighter began way back in September 1942, when the Royal Air Force posted a requirement for what they were calling a, in quotes, lightweight Tempest Mark II replacement, close quotes. They considered the Tempest, albeit very successful, as being too heavy and oversized for typical fighter duty. Sidney Cam and the team at Hawker were already pondering ideas when in January and May 1943 the Air Ministry issued two specifications for a Tempest light fighter. It puts me in mind of the ideas that led to the Bearcat as a follow-up to the Hellcat that we've already heard about in the Grumman series. Although this new aircraft would end up being almost the same size and weight as the Tempest, unlike the radically smaller Bearcat. And speaking of naval aircraft, in April the Admiralty had also added a request for a navalized version of the new fighter. So the Air Ministry was looking for a rate of climb of not less than 4,500 feet per minute to 20,000 feet, good fighting maneuverability, and a maximum speed of at least 450 miles per hour at 22,000 feet. The armament was to be 4 20mm Hispano 5 cannon with a total capacity of 600 rounds, plus the capability of carrying 2 bombs each up to 1,000 pounds. So Hawker decided to develop both types at the same time. The RAF's version would be known as the Fury, and the Sea Fury would be the Fleet Air Arms version. It's kind of a nice circle of life thing that the original Hawker aircraft that spawned the Hurricane was the biplane called the Fury. Although it was a clean sheet concept, there was no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The new fighter would borrow the best from the Tempest and improve on the rest. The semi-elliptical wing of the Tempest was kept, but shortened in span slightly. The fuselage was also quite similar in shape to the Tempest, but the cockpit level was higher to give the pilot better all-round visibility. So, what did it look like? Of course, you can go check out the pics over on Patreon. Those are free to all. But for those of you listening while driving a truck or lorry or whatever, I'll try to give you a mind's eye description. The Sea Fury looks clean and sleek with a muscular figure, bending classic World War II fighter lines with a post-war polish. Its fuselage is solidly both thick but streamlined and crowned by a large, smoothly contoured bubble canopy that offers excellent all-round visibility and gives the pilot a commanding cockpit presence. The nose is dominated by a broad, rounded cowling housing the powerful Bristol Centaurus radial engine, which bulges slightly but with clean lines, hinting at a lot of raw power under the surface. Yes, I recognize that some of this is contradictory, but somehow it really works with the Sea Fury. One 2-word description I saw was graceful beast, and that really works. The wing has a distinctive shape, moderately tapered with a slightly clipped tip designed to fit in cramped aircraft carriers, lending the plane a slightly stubby but aggressive profile. The wings sit low on the fuselage with broad trailing edges to support the big ailerons, giving a sense of agility and control. The landing gear is stout and wide set, emphasizing the Sea Fury's ruggedness for carrier duty. The large propeller, typically a 4 or 5 blade design that matches the aircraft's muscular look. In terms of color and markings, Sea Furies often wore the Royal Navy's classic dark sea blue and white or camouflage schemes. It looks athletic but sturdy, designed to punch hard and land soft on a pitching deck. Okay, so you got the picture in your mind now? Okay, enough of aesthetics. Now, if you recall, Hawker had a habit of trying different prototypes with different types of engines. Here was to be no different. 2 prototypes were to be powered by Rolls-Royce Griffin engines, 3 with Bristol Centauruses, and 1 with the Napier Sabre 4. To recap these engine types, because it's been a while, the Rolls-Royce Griffin was the end of the line for this aircraft engine producer when it came to piston engines. It was a liquid-cooled 37-liter V12. The Griffin was an updated Merlin, and although it was only slightly bigger in space than its predecessor, it displays 10 more liters. It was designed from the start to have a supercharger and ended up producing 2,400 horsepower. The Napier Sabre 4 was a liquid-cooled 24-cylinder H configuration engine with sleeve valves. The Centaurus was an air-cooled 18-cylinder 2-row sleeve valve, radial, and at this point in its development would be producing 2,360 horsepower. The first prototype to fly was a Fury, so the RAF version, on the 1st of September 1944, and it was powered by the Centaurus radial turning a Rotal 4-blade propeller. The second Fury prototype took off at the end of November 1944, and it had a Rotal 6-blade contra-rotating propeller powered by the Griffin. Serial number LA610 was possibly the fastest piston-engined Hawker aircraft ever built, reaching a speed of around 485 miles per hour through the power of a Napier Sabre 7, which was capable of developing 3,400 to 4,000 horsepower. So I'm wondering if any of you are questioning, this episode is called Sea Fury. What about the, Fury, Brian? What happened to it? Well, hold on. As the war in Europe was winding down, the RAF had to take stock of what it had and what it needed. It had plenty of late-model Spitfires and Tempests and decided that they would be good enough for after the conflict. So the RAF Fury was cancelled. But the Fleet Air Arm was in a different boat. So they were operating Seafires, which were never wholly loved by the Royal Navy, and American Lend-Lease aircraft, such as Corsairs, which would have to be returned or paid for when the war was over. The Royal Navy decided that the Sea Fury could do the job, and they ordered 200, with half of them to be built at Bolton Paul. With the end of the war and the ramping down of production, there was quite a bit of juggling to be done. I find this part kind of interesting because usually we're talking about ramping up and adding production rather than contracting. The Fury prototypes were shifted over to the Sea Fury side, which led to some strange hybrid prototypes such as planes with Stinger tailhooks but unable to fold their wings. The Royal Navy dropped their order down to only 100 machines, which meant that the Bolton Paul contract was cancelled and Hawker would do all of the work themselves. The Centaurus radial engine was also selected out of the array of the others, even though the early ones suffered frequent crankshaft failure due to a poorly designed lubrication system. Bristol's improved Centaurus 18 engine solved the problem. The first production model, which was known as the Sea Fury F Mark X, flew in September 1946. Once the land-based flight testing was completed, the trials began aboard the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious. Carrier trials found that the Sea Fury had some directional stability problems during landing, mainly due to limited rudder effectiveness. The rudder was redesigned for better control. A tail wheel lock also helped, which, as a bonus, also improved how the tail wheel retracted. In response to test pilot feedback, Hawker introduced several modifications, including a 5-bladed Rotal propeller to curb overspeed issues. Dynafocal engine mountings were added to reduce low-speed vibration, and the undercarriage was tweaked. These upgrades significantly enhanced deck handling performance. Early arrestor hook tests showed a tendency to miss the wires, but adjustments to the hook dampener quickly fixed the problem, and later an even longer and stiffer hook was swapped in. The new aircraft had a fully automated engine cooling system, which was electrically powered by an engine-driven generator supplemented by 2 independent batteries. The hydraulic system, which operated the retractable undercarriage, tail hook, and flaps, was pressurized to 1800 psi by an engine-driven pump with a hand pump in the cockpit as a backup. An engine-driven pneumatic pump powered the brakes. Fuel was stored in a total of 5 self-sealing fuel tanks, 2 in the fuselage, in front of the cockpit, and 3 within the wings. On radar-equipped Hawker Sea Furies, the radar was housed in a streamlined pod mounted beneath the starboard, that's the right wing, roughly halfway between the fuselage and the wingtip. This offset installation kept the aircraft balanced while leaving the centerline clear for weapons or drop tanks. And it's the same general position where other late World War II and early Cold War British carrier fighters carried AI, that's airborne interception radar sets. In fact, I find the Sea Fury fascinating in that it carried some equipment that we would consider more belonging in the jet era, although of course that era was coming as fast as a jet. It had equipment options including chaff dispensers for radar countermeasures and flares for illumination. Originally conceived as an air superiority fighter, the Sea Fury's robust construction and impressive payload capacity led the Royal Navy to recognize its potential as a ground attack platform. Hawker subsequently tested and certified the aircraft to carry a broad range of weapons and support gear. Standard armament consisted of 4 wing-mounted 20mm Hispano 5 cannon, while external stores could include up to 16 rockets or various bomb loads, including 500-pound or 1,000-pound general-purpose bombs, 1,000 pounds of incendiaries, mines, Type 2 smoke floats, or 90-gallon drop tanks. For reconnaissance duties, the Sea Fury could be equipped with vertical and oblique cameras linked to a cockpit control box, and for extra thrust on takeoff, jet-assisted takeoff or JATO could also be used. The Navy found the Sea Fury to be a highly aerobatic aircraft with positive flying behavior at all heights and speeds, although intentional spinning was banned. The Sea Fury could roll at a rate of 100 degrees per second. So the Sea Furies began replacing the Sea Fires in February 1947 in the Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy, which operated 74. For some years, Sea Furies and Sea Fires would operate alongside each other. The shorter-range Sea Fires would get the job of fleet defense fighter, while the Sea Fury would sally out as a longer-range fighter bomber. About 62-seat training versions were built for the Royal Navy. These were known as T-20s. The Royal Australian Navy, RAN, operated 93 Sea Furies in total. With the outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950, Sea Furies got their first chance to fight. They were sent to the peninsula as part of the British Commonwealth forces in Korea. They operated primarily as ground attack aircraft from the Royal Navy Light Fleet carriers HMS Glory, HMS Theseus, HMS Ocean, and the Australian carrier HMAS Sydney. Okay, so now I'm going to save you some confusion, if not downright embarrassment. If you see some pictures of Sea Furies with invasion stripes, don't get all upset and perturbed in wondering how the heck Sea Furies could have possibly flown for D-Day. And I'm going to explain it now to you. During the early stages of the Korean War in 1950, UN forces faced a serious risk of friendly fire because many aircraft on both sides were of similar World War II vintage, such as P-51 Mustangs, F-4U Corsairs, Yak fighters, and yes, the Sea Furies. After a Fleet Air Arm Seafire was shot down by a U.S. Air Force Boeing B-29 Superfortress on the 28th of July 1950, all Commonwealth aircraft were painted with black and white invasion stripes. So now you know. Sea Furies conducted strikes on bridges, airfields, and railways to disrupt North Korean logistics, flying a further 332 sorties without any losses. Early in the war, there was little aerial opposition, and the biggest danger was ground-based anti-aircraft fire or technical problems. One of these problems was the catapult on HMS Theseus. It was worn out, and so until it was repaired, the Sea Furies were launched with RATOG, or Rocket Assist Takeoff Gear Assistance. Previously, I said there was little aerial opposition, and that was true until 1952, when the first Chinese MiG-15 jet fighters appeared. On the 8th of August 1952, a formation of Sea Furies and Fireflies was bounced by 8 MiG-15s, during which one Firefly was badly damaged while the Sea Furies escaped unharmed. Lieutenant Peter Hogley Carmichael of 802 Squadron, flying Sea Fury WJ-232 from HMS Ocean, shot down a MiG-15, marking him as one of the only few pilots of propeller-driven aircraft to shoot down a jet during the Korean War. There is some debate as to whether Sub-Lieutenant Brian Smoo Ellis actually shot down the MiG, but Carmichael always credited it to the whole flight anyway. For an aircraft that seemed to almost not have a purpose and almost didn't exist, the Sea Fury had an amazingly long career with many different nations, with a total of 864 being produced, which is pretty good for a post-war piston-banger fighter. I've already mentioned the UK, Canada, and Australia. The Netherlands was actually the first export customer for the Sea Fury, with the Royal Netherlands Navy operating the type from 2 different aircraft carriers. Although, interestingly enough, both were named HNLMS Carol Dorman, though they served in different periods of time. The Netherlands operated the Sea Fury in both the fighter-bomber, FB-50, and the 2-seat trainer, T-20, variants. The Dutch did not just buy their Sea Furies, they also assembled many of their own under license through Fokker in Amsterdam. In practice, most major components, such as the airframes, Bristol Centaurus engines, and various systems, were manufactured in the UK by Hawker and Bristol, then shipped to the Netherlands, where Fokker handled final assembly and integrated some Dutch-specific equipment. This arrangement not only simplified fleet maintenance, but also supported the post-war Dutch aerospace industry. As a result, the Netherlands became one of the few countries outside the UK to build Sea Furies, although they did so from British-supplied kits, rather than manufacturing them entirely from scratch. In 1947, Sea Furies from Carol Dorman took part in ground attack missions against insurgent forces in the Dutch East Indies. The Netherlands also acquired and license-assembled additional Sea Furies for carrier service, but by the late 1950s, the type was phased out in favor of the jet-powered Hawker Seahawk. Iraq purchased its first batch of 30 Fury F-1 fighters and 2 Fury T-52 trainers in 1946. Initially, these aircraft were not involved in the opening stages of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. When the war began in 1948, Iraqi Furies were initially kept out of the fighting. This changed after newly arrived Israeli Boeing B-17 Flying Fortresses began bombing Arab cities in July 1948. Under pressure from Syria and Transjordan, Iraq agreed to deploy some of its Sea Furies to the front. In late July, 6 Sea Furies were flown to Damascus, but operational difficulties arose immediately. One crashed upon landing, and another was damaged in September, injuring its pilot. The Iraqi Sea Furies were hampered by a severe shortage of ammunition, largely because their British suppliers restricted deliveries, and as a result, their role was limited to armed reconnaissance sorties. There were no recorded air-to-air engagements between Iraqi Sea Furies and Israeli aircraft, and their combat activity in the war was negligible. Iraqi Sea Furies remained in service until being replaced by Sukhoi Su-7s between 1967 and 1969. Pakistan was also a large export customer. In 1949, Pakistan ordered 50 Sea Furies, and additional orders meant that a total of 87 new-built Sea Furies were purchased and delivered between 1950 and 1952. Pakistan also bought some used ex-Fleet Air Arm and Iraqi Sea Furies, and this fleet was operated until they started to be replaced by North American F-86 Sabres in 1955. The last Sea Furies in Pakistani service were retired in 1960. Cuba's use of the Sea Fury is one of the most colorful and combat-proven chapters in the type's history. In the late 1950s, the Batista government purchased 17 Sea Furies from Hawker, 15 single-seat FB-11 fighters, and 2 two-seat T-20 trainers. These aircraft became the mainstay of the Fuerza Aérea del Ejército de Cuba. Sorry about that. The Cuban Army Air Force, or FAEC. They were delivered between 1958 and early 1959, arriving just before the Cuban Revolution toppled Batista. When Fidel Castro came to power in January 1959, the Sea Furies were absorbed into the new Fuerza Aérea Revolucionaria, FAR. Initially, they were used for routine patrols and training, but their most famous combat service came during the Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961. At that time, the FAR had about a dozen operational Sea Furies. In the opening stages of the invasion, they flew multiple strike missions against the CIA-backed Exile Invasion Force. Sea Fury pilots attacked landing craft, supply ships, and vehicles along the beaches at Playa Girón and Playa Larga. One of the most notable actions occurred on April 17, 1961, when a Cuban Sea Fury pilot, Captain Enrique Carreras Roja, shot down two B-26 Invaders. These are among the very few confirmed piston-engine fighter kills of the jet age. The Sea Furies also sank the freighter Houston and badly damaged the ammunition ship Rio Escondido, cutting off vital supplies to the invaders. Carlos Uyala, a Nicaraguan-born pilot flying for the Cuban Revolutionary Air Force, took off in a Sea Fury from San Antonio de los Banos Air Force Base to attack the invasion beaches and shipping off Playa Girón. During a low-level strafing run against the landing craft and supply ships of Brigade 2506, his aircraft was hit by .50 caliber anti-aircraft fire from the invasion force's ships. Uyala's Sea Fury crashed into the sea, killing him instantly. Uyala's death marked the only combat fatality among the Sea Fury pilots during the invasion. But the type did play a decisive role in halting the amphibious landings, sinking and damaging several vessels, and providing close air support to ground troops. Cuban sources later credited Uyala with pressing his attack even while under heavy fire, helping to disable one of the key supply ships before being shot down. After the Bay of Pigs, the Sea Furies remained in Cuban service for several more years, but with the arrival of Soviet-supplied jets like the MiG-15 and 17, they were gradually retired from frontline duties. Sea Furies arrived on the scene at a good time for them to go from frontline service in Commonwealth countries to being retired and then to other countries for second-hand type duty. One example would be Burma, which received 21 ex-Fleet Air Arm Sea Furies. Burma used theirs for counter-insurgency work, and on the 15th of February 1961, a Burmese Sea Fury shot down a Republic of China Air Force consolidated PB-4Y privateer near the Thai-Burmese border, which has got to be one of the last time that World War II era aircraft fought it out outside of video games. From there, some went to private collections or were engaged in air racing, so some are still airworthy today. WJ232 is owned by the Fighter Collection in the UK, and it's a popular airshow performer. And NL628, operated in the United States, regularly participates in demonstrations. But my favorite Sea Fury is TG-119. It was constructed as a Sea Fury FB-11 and was taken on strength with the Royal Canadian Navy in 1948. In 1963, she was brought to the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum, where I get to see her, but not as often as the others, as she is tucked away in the reserve hangar. But it's always worth it, as she sure is a beauty. I hope you've enjoyed this episode where I fix some regrets and wrap up this series on Hawker fighters. Remember, you can always support me via Patreon, get access to those bonuses, and also participate in the fun group chats. You can also give me a good review, share me with other Warbird fans, or toss me one of those tips through PayPal. Thank you so much, and until next time.